There's more to the cooling system than meets the eye. Many performance problems may be encountered with the cooling system. One may be seen as a warning of general overheating. The other is seldom noticed because overheating is not indicated. Serious engine damage, including piston and liner scoring and cracked heads, may result from this hidden type of overheating. It is these performance problems and the operation of the modern cooling system that we are going to discuss. This engine has overheated several times in the past. Maybe I better get this ring checked out after I get into the terminal. After checking the unit at the terminal, the driver and supervisor decided to have it checked by more experienced people. Immediately upon arriving at the distributorship, the driver discusses his problem with the shop foreman, telling him the symptoms involved. The information the foreman gets from the driver and his log sheet will help him troubleshoot the problem and reach a final decision. After troubleshooting the unit, the technician determines it may be a flow problem, and the puzzled helper wants to know just what makes the technician think it may be a flow problem. Yes, just what does make our technician think this may be a flow problem? Several weeks ago, he attended a training school class where he learned the importance of keeping air out of the cooling system. And the technician found that there's more to a cooling system than just a radiator.
How important is the cooling system? Very important. Research and field use have proven the positive flow de-aerating cooling system to be the best type available to cool your engine. In this system, the radiator actually consists of three main parts: the top tank with the filler neck and cap, the radiator core and fins, and the bottom tank. In this top tank, the baffle plate, the baffle vent tube, and the fill line sump separate the reserve volume from the header space. The system also includes a water pump inlet, the centrifugal water pump, the engine, the corrosion resistor, the thermostat, and the thermostat housing, the bypass line, the engine outlet line, the vent line, and the fill line. All cooling systems have some of the same features as this one. And all systems must perform four basic functions. These basic functions are absorption, circulation, control, and dissipation. The coolant accepts about 1/3 of the combustion heat from the engine parts, which is called absorption. To assure proper absorption in the system, we must control the mineral content, air in the coolant, or aeration, and any restrictions, such as anti-leak additives or other foreign material. Good absorption cannot take place without circulation. Circulation depends on gravity, system pressure, and a water pump to force the coolant through the system. Circulation will be hampered by any additional restrictions in the plumbing, radiator, head, or block. Let's say we do have good absorption and circulation. Now we've got to control the temperature of the coolant. The specified operating temperature range is maintained by the thermostat and/or the shutters in the radiator. The opening and closing of the thermostat and/or the shutters keeps the temperature in the desired range. These shutters are set to open and close in a temperature range that's close to the desired operating temperature. The shutters control the outside airflow passing through the radiator. This air is sucked through or sometimes pushed through the core by the fan. The coolant heat is carried away or dissipated by this airflow through the core tubes and fins. So you can see that the core tubes and fins must be kept clean and straight. You'll remember we mentioned that this system is called the positive flow de-aerating cooling system. This is an actual working model of the system, which has had a few modifications and checking devices added. In the positive flow system, a recommended pressure cap allows for the expansion of the coolant and for the escape of air during engine operation. The incorporated vacuum valve allows for re-entry of air during the engine cool-off period. The fill neck, if used, must have a drilled hole on one side just inside the top tank for air bleed without coolant loss. The depth that this fill neck extends down into the top tank determines the normal coolant level of the system when cold. From the top of the top tank to the baffle plate is the reserve volume, which includes space for expansion of coolant and air, as well as drawdown capacity. Drawdown is the amount of coolant which can be lost before aeration occurs. The baffle plate, including the fill line sump and baffle vent tube, divides the top tank into two sections. The baffle plate must be sealed completely. The baffle vent tube must not extend below the plate. The upper portion should extend well above the coolant level and be directed so as to prevent turbulence in air from reaching the fill line sump. This baffle vent tube sizing is extremely critical. The baffle vent tube bleeds air from the core during fill. It vents entrained air with the thermostat open, and it vents after boil. After boil is the result of heat transferred to the coolant after the engine is shut down and when the circulation is stopped. The fill line sump at the rear center of the baffle plate allows for maximum drawdown capacity of the coolant. In the header space, sufficient clearance is required between the baffle plate and header plate to provide even coolant distribution to the core tubes. The engine outlet coolant must be pumped into the header space. The engine outlet plumbing should be no smaller than the thermostat housing outlet with minimum restrictions. And this sizing is important. The radiator core must have enough tubes and fins to provide the necessary heat dissipation. The coolant flows through the radiator, down into the bottom tank, then on through the water pump inlet line. In this area, beware of any restrictions caused by a need for special line routing and sizing. The fill line must be installed to the sump in such a way as to prevent vortexing. Vortexing is the swirling action of liquids which will cause aeration. This line must run from the sump in a constant downhill flow, and it's connected as close as possible to the pump inlet. The fill line and fittings must be of specified sizes. There must be no external accessories connected into this line, such as an alarm or a cab heater return line. The vent line de-aerates the system during fill and engine operation, and for this reason, the line and fitting sizes are critical. This line is routed from the engine side of the thermostat housing up to the highest point in the reserve volume. On engines with two thermostats, there may be a vent line from each of the thermostat housings. The vent line fitting in the reserve volume should be directed away from the fill line sump. A piggyback tank may be added to the top tank reserve volume when more drawdown capacity is needed. This addition must be common only to the reserve volume, level with the baffle plate. The sump must be relocated into the new section. Make sure that the baffle plate is sealed completely. If a piggyback tank is not feasible, a remote-mounted surge tank may be installed anywhere above the top radiator core header plate to increase the reserve volume. The top tank then becomes all header space, and the baffle plate must be removed or sufficiently opened. The pressure cap is transferred to the surge tank, and a solid cap is installed on the top tank. A line of specified size is installed between these tanks. It replaces the baffle plate vent tube. The vent line and fill line must now be rerouted to the surge tank. A fill line sump should be installed on the underside of the surge tank, and the fill line must be connected to the sump in such a way as to prevent vortexing. All specifications pertaining to the reserve volume are now applicable to the surge tank. Up to now, we've been talking about the positive flow de-aerating system parts and their functions, as well as some of the principles involved. Now, let's discuss some of the tests which are necessary in order to determine whether or not the system is functioning properly. All these tests will be performed with the pressure cap removed in order to obtain the most accurate results. To check for restrictions, connect lines from the pump inlet and from engine block pressure to a three-way valve. Then connect a compound gauge to the remaining valve opening. Install a sight glass in the engine coolant outlet line. The fill rate is established by filling a container with water at the specified maximum flow in 1 minute. Mark the handle of the faucet being used when this flow is reached. Use this reference position to fill the cooling system. Now let's fill the system at the specified maximum rate of flow. This is done with a closed thermostat. If the cooling system will not accept the specified maximum gallons per minute, then our fill line or vents or fittings may be restricted or improperly located. Now let's start the engine and make sure the block water pressure is obtained within 15 seconds after starting. Run the engine for 5 minutes at 1,000 to 1,200 RPM to purge air from the heaters and accessories. Added coolant should not exceed the specified amount. Make sure that the proper radiator coolant level is maintained. Run the engine at high idle until it's warmed up enough to open the thermostat. And check the sight glass. The system should be de-aerated within the prescribed time. Now, the inlet side of the water pump must have a positive pressure at rated engine RPM. This positive pressure should be approximately the same as the static pressure. If it's not, the radiator core, piping, or fittings from the bottom tank to the pump inlet are restricting the flow. If there's a vacuum at the pump inlet due to system restrictions or to an improperly sealed baffle plate, then air will get into the system. And when this entrained air reaches the water pump, it can surround the impeller and cause intermittent flow stoppage. The drawdown test is performed with the engine sufficiently warm to open the thermostat, the system full of coolant, and the engine running at rated RPM. Drain coolant from the pressure side of the block. This flow must not exceed the specified rate of flow per minute. As soon as air bubbles appear in the engine outlet sight glass, close the drain. Measure the amount of coolant removed from the system. This is actual drawdown and should not be less than the specified amount of the total system. If it is less, then more drawdown capacity is required in order to obtain the minimum specification. Now, the following demonstration shows a comparison between the positive flow de-aerating cooling system and the old-style slotted dam system. We'll be using the same working model that we introduced earlier, with its sight glasses, additional valves, and pressure fittings that are not normally used in your applications. But first, let's convert this cooling system into the old style. Open the trapdoor to represent the slotted dam baffle plate. Next, close the vent line valves and the fill line valves. With the engine running at about 2400 RPM, the compound gauge shows that our pump inlet pressure is 0 psi. Now we turn the three-way valve to get a block pressure reading, 19 to 19.5 psi. Since we no longer have a sealed baffle plate, we have completely lost our header pressure. A great deal of turbulence is evident in the top tank, but there are no signs of aeration. The old style system performs very well when it's new, but when there's a restriction to flow in this system, it will not function nearly as efficiently as the new style system. Now, by partially closing this gate valve, we can simulate a restriction caused by a partially plugged radiator core. This restriction causes a vacuum in the pump inlet, resulting in lower block pressure. The system then becomes aerated. The vacuum reading tells us that the pump is sucking the coolant. We've lost our positive pressure. Now let's convert this system to the positive flow de-aerating cooling system. First, close the trapdoor to seal the baffle plate. Then open the fill line and vent line valves. We're still running at the same RPM. As you can see, the pump inlet is now pressure instead of suction or vacuum. The block pressure is 22.5 psi, and the header pressure is 8 psi. Notice the air bubbles disappearing from the coolant, despite the fact that we still have the same restriction that we had in the old system. At this point, let's remove the pump inlet restriction. The pump inlet pressure has increased to 2 psi, proving that the new system definitely pressurizes the water pump inlet and that it de-aerates the system completely.